Folks, I want to talk to you about something that happened this week that I think matters more than most people realize. On June 29th and 30th of this year, the United States Supreme Court handed down a series of decisions that, taken together, represent one of the most consequential 48 hours for American governance in modern memory. Now, I've been around a long time. I served 8 years in the Oval Office, and I learned things in that building you can't learn anywhere else. One of the most important lessons was this: the American system is designed to push back. That's not a flaw. That's the whole architecture. When a president overreaches, eventually the institutions respond. Sometimes slowly, sometimes imperfectly, but they respond. What we saw this week was the system talking back. The Supreme Court ruled against the president on mail-in ballots. It struck down his executive order on birthright citizenship. It refused to hear his appeal in the E. Jean Carroll sexual assault case. And his own Republican senators publicly told him they will not eliminate the filibuster to pass his voting bill. Now, here's what makes this week truly extraordinary. This isn't some hostile liberal court handing Trump these defeats. 3 of these 9 justices were appointed by Donald Trump himself. This is a court he shaped, delivering results he cannot accept. And his response to all of it, the social media tirades, the screaming at senators behind closed doors, the holding of a housing bill hostage, that reaction tells you more about the state of this presidency than any single ruling ever could. And we'll come back to that in a moment, because that's the part that worries me most. Now, let me set the stage here, because context matters. Donald Trump is in the 2nd year of his 2nd term. His approval rating, according to the polling averages, sits around 40%, with disapproval well above 50%. That's historically dangerous territory for any president heading into a midterm election. The country is dealing with an unpopular military engagement with Iran that Congress never authorized. Gas prices are elevated. Consumer confidence is low. There was a government shutdown not long ago. And the 2026 midterms are now just 4 months away. His party controls both chambers of Congress, but just barely. The House majority is razor thin. The Senate majority depends on near total unity. And here is the irony that I think history will remember about this moment. Donald Trump stacked the Supreme Court with 3 justices, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, and Barrett. He dominates his party like no Republican president in modern memory. And yet, in the span of 1 week, both the court and his own senators defied him on matters he considers existential. Senate Majority Leader John Thune has said publicly, and I quote, "It's a function of the math. We've got to deal with the real world." Senator Tom Tillis, a retiring Republican from North Carolina, has accused Trump of treating the Senate like a manufacturing department rather than its own branch of government. When I was president, I learned early that you cannot command the other branches. You persuade them, you negotiate, you build coalitions. The system was designed so that no single person could control every lever. And that design is being tested right now. Let me walk you through what actually happened at the court, because the details matter. First, on June 29th, in Watson versus Republican National Committee. The court upheld Mississippi's law allowing mail-in ballots to be counted if they're postmarked by Election Day but arrive up to 5 days later. The vote was 5-4. And here's what's remarkable. The majority opinion was written by Justice Amy Coney Barrett, a Trump appointee. She was joined by Chief Justice Roberts, plus Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. Barrett wrote that the federal Election Day statutes require the electorate's choice to be made on Election Day, but they do not set a deadline for ballot receipt. That's a textual reading. That's what judges are supposed to do. Trump called it very detrimental to honest elections. The same day, the court declined to hear Trump's appeal of the $5 million jury verdict, finding he sexually assaulted and defamed the writer E. Jean Carroll. No noted dissent. Every avenue of appeal is now exhausted. A unanimous jury found what it found. The highest court said there's nothing left to review. Also on June 29th came the ruling in Trump versus Slaughter, where the court voted 6-3 to allow the president to fire commissioners at independent agencies like the FTC, overturning a 91-year-old precedent called Humphrey's Executor. Then on June 30th, the court struck down Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, 6-3, reaffirming the 14th Amendment. And it struck down campaign finance limits on coordinated party spending. 5 major decisions, 2 days, and the Constitution mostly held, but not everywhere. Now here's where I want to shift from what the court did to how the president responded. Because leadership is not just about winning or losing. It's about how you carry yourself when things don't go your way. On June 24th, just days before these rulings, Trump canceled the planned signing of a landmark bipartisan housing bill, legislation that passed the House 358-32 and the Senate 85-5, because Congress hadn't passed the Save America Act, his strict voter ID bill. A table with the presidential seal was already set up in Statuary Hall. Republican leaders were giving speeches praising the bill. Then Trump posted on Truth Social that the signing was hereby canceled until the SAVE Act passed. He called the housing bill of minor importance. Let me tell you something. When you're president, people are counting on you. Families struggling with housing costs don't care about your political feuds. You don't hold their lives hostage because you're angry about a vote you can't win. Then came the closed-door lunch with Senate Republicans, where multiple senators described the meeting as tense. Trump berated them over the filibuster, over the war powers vote on Iran, over the SAVE Act. Senator Bill Cassidy got into a heated exchange with the president and later told reporters Trump tried to bully him out of asking legitimate questions. Senator Cornyn said the president preached unity at the end, but spent the entire hour on things that were not unifying. I worked with Newt Gingrich on the Balanced Budget Act. I signed welfare reform I didn't love every piece of, but I understood effective leadership means knowing when to negotiate, not when to scream. Now I want to elevate this beyond individual rulings, because what concerns me most isn't any one decision. It's the structural pattern. Let me identify 3 shifts that I believe will reshape American governance for a generation. First, the Slaughter ruling on independent agencies. By overturning Humphrey's executor, The court gave the president direct hire and fire authority over commissioners at approximately 24 multi-member agencies that Congress designed to be independent. The FTC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. Justice Sotomayor wrote in her dissent that the decision gives the president a power unknown even to the English crown. She warned that dozens of independent commissions will now likely become purely executive agencies. That independence was not an accident, folks. It was the architecture. We built those agencies to be insulated from political pressure for a reason. Second, the Voting Rights Act. Back in April, the court's decision in Louisiana versus Calais effectively gutted Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, allowing states to dismantle majority-minority congressional districts. Red states can now redraw maps in time for the midterms, potentially costing minority communities the representation they have fought for since 1965. Leader Jeffries called it the work of an illegitimate Trump court. The Voting Rights Act was the crown jewel of the civil rights movement, and we are watching it be dismantled piece by piece. Third, campaign finance. The NRSC ruling struck down limits on coordinated spending between parties and candidates. Justice Kagan warned it would lead to circumvention of contribution limits and quid pro quo corruption. More money does not equal more democracy. Together, these three shifts represent a fundamental rebalancing of power in this country, and not in the people's favor. Let me explain the political chess game that's happening here, because I think Trump's behavior only makes sense if you understand the panic behind it. The Save America Act would require documentary proof of citizenship to vote in federal elections. It passed the House, but it is completely stuck in the Senate. Democrats are unanimously opposed, and at least 5 Republican senators, Murkowski, Collins, Tillis, Cassidy, and McConnell, have refused to support eliminating the filibuster to force it through. Tillis said plainly that the bill cannot be implemented before this election. Now look, non-citizen voting is already illegal under federal law. This bill was never really about election security. It was about making it harder for certain Americans, those who don't have easy access to passports or birth certificates, to exercise their right to vote. Trump himself admitted on June 29th that the SAVE Act is probably not going to happen because he doesn't have the votes. And yet, he's holding a bipartisan housing bill hostage over it. He's berating his own senators. He wrote on Truth Social that anyone who opposes it supports cheating, and called the situation more dangerous than World War I, World War II, Pearl Harbor, and September 11th. That is not the language of strategy. That's the language of desperation. Meanwhile, Democrats swept the 2025 off-year elections in Virginia and New Jersey. The generic ballot favors Democrats by nearly 4 points. Brookings projects Republicans could lose a dozen or more House seats. Every midterm is a referendum on the president. And right now, the country is telling this president something he doesn't want to hear. Some Republicans privately know this. Thune said his path to keeping the majority depends on kitchen table issues, not relitigating 2020. But Trump won't let them pivot, and that may be what cost them everything. So where does this go? Let me lay out 3 possible paths forward. Scenario 1, a Democratic wave in the midterms. If Trump's approval stays in the low 40s or below, if the economy doesn't improve, if the Iran conflict continues to drain public confidence, Democrats are well positioned to retake the House and potentially challenge for the Senate. Leader Jeffries has already said that if Democrats win the House, everything is on the table regarding the Supreme Court, including potential expansion. Now, I'll say this as someone who's been in those rooms. Winning an election is one thing. Governing is another. Democrats need to show they're not just against Trump, they're for something. They need an affirmative agenda on housing, on health care, on wages, on protecting voting rights. You don't build a majority just on opposition. Scenario 2. Trump doubles down and fractures his own party. He keeps demanding the filibuster's elimination, keeps berating senators, keeps holding legislation hostage. The Republican caucus splits further. Retiring members like Tillis and Cassidy feel free to push back, while MAGA loyalists dig in. I've seen this before. When a president turns on his own party, nobody wins. The country certainly doesn't. Already, Senator Murkowski compared Trump to a moose startling a team of sled dogs. Senator Cornyn says the president preaches unity after an hour of division. That's not a party in command. That's a party coming apart. Scenario 3, and this is the one that keeps me up at night, the long-term structural damage. Regardless of what happens in November, several of this court's rulings will reshape governance for a generation. The Slaughter decision means every future president will have far more control over independent agencies. The Calais decision hollowed out the Voting Rights Act. The NRSC ruling unleashed unlimited, coordinated party spending. Trump will leave office eventually, but the powers he's gained and the protections he's destroyed will outlast him. That's what I worry about most. Let me close with this. The Constitution did its job this week, in some cases. It protected birthright citizenship, a guarantee that goes back 158 years. It protected the right of states to count lawfully cast mail-in ballots. It upheld the verdict of a unanimous jury. But in other areas, executive power, voting rights, campaign finance, the Constitution needed more help than it got. And that's the truth about democracy that I think people sometimes forget. It isn't self-sustaining. It doesn't protect itself. It requires active defense by citizens, by legislators, by leaders who are willing to put the system above themselves. Now, we are about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of American independence. 250 years of this experiment. The question we face isn't whether the system survived 1 week of Supreme Court rulings. The question is whether the next 250 years will look like the promise or the erosion. I've always believed that the American people, when they have the facts, will do the right thing. But they need the facts. And they need leaders who tell them the truth, even when the truth is uncomfortable, even when it doesn't fit on a social media post, even when it requires admitting that you lost. So here's what I'd ask of every American watching this. Vote. Pay attention. Hold your leaders accountable, all of them, including the ones you agree with. Read the rulings. Understand what's at stake. Don't let anybody tell you these are just legal technicalities, because they're not. They are decisions about who has power, who gets to vote, and who answers to whom in this country. The system talked back this week. Now it's our turn.